Welcome to the Global Marketing Show, the podcast for all things international business. I'm your host, Wendy Pease, president of Rapport International and a translation expert. Come along with me today as we talk to an expert in the global marketing world about facing their biggest fears, hearing about mistakes they made or saw, discussing best practices, and sharing fun travel, language, and culture stories. Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of the Global Marketing Show. We're here at RESI, the Conference for Life Sciences Nation sponsors to introduce investors and med device and life sciences, biotech companies around the world. So just to remind you, we're brought to you by Rapport International, and they bring you high quality translation in over 200 languages. And today's tidbit is another one about gestures. And that if you do the cheek screw motion in Italy, it's praise and, ooh, what a pretty girl or handsome guy. Whereas in Germany, it means crazy.
Yep.
So my guest here, I'm guessing he's from Germany.
I'm from Germany. That is correct. Yes.
His name is Thorsten Waloschek, and he's from NeoPredics.
Yes.
So Thorsten, tell me, that does mean?
Well, it's crazy. It's more like, there's something I don't trust you. I don't believe what you're saying. Are you kidding me? That's what it actually means.
Okay.
If you go further up with the gesture to your skull, that means you're crazy. But it's quite insulting. This is more like, I'm not sure if I believe what you're saying. Is that maybe a story? The one up there, that really means I think
you're
you're
crazy. So it's
yeah.
Well, so tell me about your company and what you're doing.
Yes. So NeoPredics is a digital health startup. We're spin-off, actually not in Germany, but in Switzerland. I'm German, but the company is based in Switzerland. We are a spin-off from the University of Basel in Switzerland, founded by two clinicians, a pediatrician and a neonatologist. And we are focusing on predictive analytics. We are developing predictive analytics for neonatal and maternal applications. We can predict the dynamic progression of certain biomarkers in the newborn as well as in the pregnant women to help clinicians to identify women, patients, newborns or pregnant women today that will be in a critical situation tomorrow before they show symptoms. So enabling clinicians to be more proactive and avoid complications in the long run.
So what kind of situations?
So for example, our first product that we have on the market is neonatal jaundice, bilirubin prediction. Bilirubin is the biomarker for neonatal jaundice. Neonatal jaundice, when the skin turns yellow right after birth, we can predict the dynamic progression of this biomarker at the time of initial discharge from the hospital for the next 2.5 days. So we can help clinicians to identify those babies at the time of discharge that will need treatment within the next 2 days and that will come back to the hospital. So we can tell clinicians basically, well, we don't tell clinicians what to do, but we can highlight to clinicians, well, maybe reconsider sending this patient home because he or she will come back.
So then the baby can stay there and not have the jaundice get the treatment for it. And wow,
Exactly.
and not cause the panic when the parents...
Exactly. And the last thing that, I don't know if you have
I
children.
have 2 children, yes.
Maybe you remember those times when you got home the first time. The very last thing you want to do is within 2 days rush back to the hospital.
Absolutely not.
That is interrupting parental bonding. That is interrupting lactation. So all of these very, very, soft factors, but it's important for the baby to develop well. And again, bringing back to the hospital interrupts this whole process. So maybe it is better and easier for the patient to stay another 24 hours in the hospital, be treated, and be sent home healthy and good to go.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So that's what we have on the market in Europe as well as in the United States. We have MDR-CE certification. We are FDA registered here in the United States. We have first users. We just recently signed up a commercial partner that helps us with the go-to-market strategy. And we now are developing a new product, which is in the maternal side of things, because we believe a healthy start into life, the best thing we can do is to enable a healthy pregnancy.
Right.
So that's why we are now focusing a little bit more on maternal health, and we are developing a preeclampsia prediction.
Oh,
Globally, more than 500,000 babies, unborn babies, die because of preeclampsia as a consequence of preeclampsia. And about 70,000 women die every year because of preeclampsia.
I had
So
no
it's not a
idea.
rare condition. It happens.
Yeah.
Just recently, last year, unfortunately, Tori Bowie, who was a gold medalist of the U.S. Summer Olympics team, died because of preeclampsia. So it's happening right here in this country. And so we are developing, we participated in the Mayo Clinic Accelerate program.
Mhm.
And based on that wonderful collaboration with the Mayo Clinic, we are developing an easy early prediction of preeclampsia that will help OBGYNs to identify pregnant women as early as at the end of the first trimester, after 12 weeks of gestation. Some women don't even know that they're pregnant at that time.
Right.
At that time, we can identify women that have a very high risk of developing preeclampsia during the onset of their pregnancy. And again, enabling clinicians, we cannot prevent anything, but we can help clinicians to identify these patients on an individual basis, not statistically,
Uh-huh.
on an individual basis that will run into complications later on.
That's amazing. That's fantastic. So let's go back to your first device on the jaundice
Yeah.
predictor. So you're a Swiss company.
We are a Swiss company with subsidiaries in Germany and in the United States.
Okay. So talk to me about going global. It's a global marketing show.
Yeah.
So at what point did the company go global? When, when it started doing clinical trials or after that? And, like, where did you think?
Yeah, the company was founded in 2020, so pretty much 4 years ago. And we started our US affiliate 1 year later, so very early on. So in 2021, we already, prepared the market launch here in the United States.
And why the U.S. as
Why the US?
first?
Because it's still the single unified biggest medical device market in the world.
Okay.
I mean, my background, I was born and raised in Germany, but I'm a dual citizen. I'm German American. So
Okay.
for me, I feel very comfortable here. It's my second home.
Okay.
So for me, doing business in the United States is maybe a little less complicated than for Europeans that are not that closely affiliated with the United States.
Okay. So you had a innate familiarity with it. It
Absolutely.
was easier to come here,
Absolutely.
which I hear oftentimes with how
And
people pick
my
countries.
whole life was very international. My father was Polish. I was born in Germany. I studied in the UK and in the Netherlands. I lived and worked in Germany and France and Denmark, in the United States. I spent extended periods of times in Southeast Asia. So for me, it's the world. And whether it's American or German or Swedish babies, doesn't matter. It's a baby. And I want to make sure that every baby has the best possible start into life.
Right. Yeah. It's so interesting. That's why I started the Global Marketing Show, is because there are so many people that have lived in one country and they only think about that country and they're scared of other countries. And so it's always amazing to me that people who have had early experiences being a global citizen are more apt to do global business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, I moved to a different country when I was 19.
Yeah.
The first time on my own, not like with my
Yeah.
parents. And then from there on, I always went back to Germany. I like Germany a lot, but I always want to experience, the world. And I cannot imagine just being in one country or culture.
One country. So you automatically think the world. So
Absolutely.
you start, the first market you enter is the United States. And then where do you think about
So actually,
next?
we entered the United States, then we went back into Europe, launched in Europe.
Okay.
It was a second step because of regulatory challenges, quite honestly. And now we are also looking at the Asian market. So we are connected to Japan quite strongly, actually. So, but in the end, it's global. We are not saying, well, we want to be in the United States or we want to be in Japan. We really want to help every newborn baby, every young family, every pregnant woman. Sometimes there's, financial, commercial situations that make one country a little bit more easy to go to than other countries, especially as a small startup company. But in the end, as any health issue. I think it's a global market. And we always say, because we are so focused on maternal and neonatal, we want to serve and support the most underserved patient population globally. And
Yeah.
it's always pregnant women and newborn babies. So it's not that here are healthcare disparities, maternal health deserts, and sometimes racial discrimination. It happens everywhere in the world. Pregnant women and newborn babies are always the least taken care of population, no matter where.
and that's
So
crazy to me.
it's for us as a
Yeah.
company, it's natural to go global.
Right, right. Now, you mentioned regulatory
Yeah,
challenges, and I always like to get into mistakes and challenges
yeah,
because I think that's where the real learning
yeah.
opportunity is for our listeners. What regulatory issues and challenges did you have, and what did you learn from that?
So I mean, challenges is a big
Yeah.
word. I mean, the idea of predictive analytics is software as a medical device, clinical decision support systems. It's all the same thing. It's so new that regulatory bodies, authorities don't yet really understand how to, handle it, because the whole quality management system idea, the regulatory environment, whether it's here in the United States, whether it is in Europe or in any other country, comes from hardware. Because for the last 50, 60 years, ventilators, anesthesia devices, this, that, the other thing, it's all hardware. And
Right.
suddenly, not suddenly, but for the last 10, 15, 20 years, there's more and more software coming. And now it's predictive software, which is the next
Oh,
step.
right.
And the regulatory systems can't keep up with the development. And that makes it challenging for both sides, for the regulatory body as well as for the, industry.
Right.
So it's much easier to bring a medical device hardware to market, and just the terminology, software as a medical device, already tells you there's something, we're trying to match something which wasn't meant to be matched.
Oh, okay. So just getting them to
Yeah,
understand what it is and how it's using it and how it needs to be authorized and why it can't
exactly.
just be
So that's
duplicated
a
by
challenge, not
everybody.
only for our company, but
Yes.
for any company in that field.
And that's globally
And,
then.
and, and that's global. I mean, a few years ago, I've been between Europe and the United States for the last 20 years, going back and forth. Up
Yeah.
until 5, 6, 7 years ago, everybody said, well, Europe first, because the C certification is a little bit more straightforward than the FDA process. That completely flipped around. Now it's a one-way street from Europe to the United States, because for me, the FDA was never anything that I didn't want to deal with. But
Right.
again, maybe that's my little bit American background. But I think the FDA is easier to work with as a startup company, especially,
Oh,
than regulatory bodies in Europe. So that really changed. And you see that because there's a one-way street from Europe to the United States.
okay. And now you mentioned Japan
Yeah,
earlier in the
yeah.
conversation. And so what are you finding with the Japanese regulatory?
It's very well established. It certainly is also especially as a startup company, it's always difficult to really understand regulatory systems when you're not local or if you have no local presence.
Right.
We don't have a Japanese presence.
Ah,
But I personally have a long-standing relationship with companies in Japan. So that will help us to get into that market, because we have basically, friendly companies that will support us and help us to
friendly.
understand. It's always also the culture behind it. It's not only the system itself, but it's much easier to work within a regulatory system when you understand the culture behind it.
Oh, do say more on that.
Yeah. So just the way, when you look at I'm not a legal expert, but the legal system in Europe,
Mhm.
excluding the UK, and the United States, is very, very different from a cultural point of view. I'm not talking about the individual laws. It's just the cultural approach to legal environments. It's different in the Anglo-Saxon world, Canada, United States, UK, etc., and the rest of Europe. And that also plays into the regulatory system. So here in the United States, it's much easier to negotiate. Many things are negotiable.
Huh.
There is, in the end, there's a law and there's a judge and there's a jury and but many things are negotiable. And that's why I'm not aware of any TV show or series or something that is happening in a European courtroom, because there is no negotiation possible. That's the law. You
follow
done.
the
Yeah,
law.
well, and if you don't follow, that's how it's applied, and done deal. Not that's it, but
Oh,
yeah.
interesting.
And
That
here
it's
in the
more
United
black
States,
and
I mean,
white, and here and everything's gray. Interpretation.
yes,
It's
it's a
open
lot
to
of interpretation. And now, of course, the FDA has, and that's good, has very strict rules and regulations,
Yeah.
no doubt. But in order to understand how to maneuver in that environment, actually, there's more wiggle room. There's more ways to find the right path to market
Yes.
than in Europe, because black and white in Europe. And
Okay.
if it's black and you're on the white side and it
Yeah,
doesn't
sorry.
really work,
Yeah.
then it doesn't work. Then start over. And here you can negotiate.
So you said you have connections in Japan. You have friends
Yeah.
that can help you with
Yeah.
the culture. Are they in the same, like, maternal health and young?
Yeah, it comes. I worked for the most of my life in the neonatal environment. And so, yeah, it's the neonatal environment where I have that network. And jaundice is something that is also in Japan a challenge, a healthcare challenge.
Yeah.
So that's why that is good.
Yeah. So it goes back again and again. I'm hearing that in medical devices, it's less about your company culture, but build your networks on your specialty in the global environment to help you think globally.
Exactly. And especially as a small startup company. I mean, we don't have the resources, we don't have the knowledge, we don't have the experience to be here, there, anywhere.
Right.
So I'm a very big supporter of building not only networks, but partnerships, collaborations around the world, also with what might be seen as a competitor. I mean, competition is not bad, right?
Right.
Competition is a good thing,
Right.
I think. And sometimes competitors can actually also work together and help each other to be more successful together.
Right.
And that doesn't mean joining forces right away. But in the startup world, it's all about collaboration. And so to enter a market where we don't have the cultural, legal experience, I would never try it on my own. I would always look for a partner that helps us as a company to enter that market.
Yeah, that's excellent advice that I don't think is brought up in the podcast episodes enough, about how you form partnerships, and you don't have to go fully in together, but how do you work together and establish that relationship and trust over time?
And I think really it's a cultural aspect.
Yes.
I mean, yes, the disease pattern most likely is the same, whether it's a German or American baby.
Right.
But just think about for example, in Germany, where I was born, it's still not possible to market prescriptive drugs directly to consumers, to patients. It's illegal. That's unheard of.
Yeah.
So it's a cultural aspect.
Right.
Whereas here in the United States, for as long as I can think, there was always direct to consumer marketing.
Yeah, that was new in like the 80s.
Yeah.
Before then it wasn't allowed.
But for many, many years.
Now
with that, and of course there's pros and cons, but with that comes an educational piece to the consumer, to the patient.
Yes.
We don't have that in Germany.
Right.
And again, I don't want to judge what's better or worse, but it's a different culture.
Yes.
And we are in the medical device business, not in the pharmaceutical business, although that's where I started my career. If you understand that cultural difference, then you can tailor your marketing according to it. But if you don't understand the cultural difference, that's not a good starting.
Now, how about language? You're multilingual, but you don't speak all the languages of the world. How have you handled, or your company's handled, the translation or interpretation aspects?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's also a legal aspect. You need a, formal translation office, and then you need to validate the translations. But to your point, we are always trying the same thing, to find a local partner that speaks that language. And it doesn't have to be a necessarily native speaker. I mean, that's the best thing. But if we want to go, I did a lot of business in Brazil. If you want to go into Brazil, well, find somebody who speaks Portuguese and don't work for an interpreter. Work with somebody who speaks the local language. And it doesn't have to be an employee. I mean, it can be an outside consultant that helps you for a couple of months. But I always make sure that we're targeting a country in local language because it's a cultural aspect.
Interesting. So you would hire somebody there. Well, okay. So you're going back to the partnership of this person's coming in as a partner with you as a
Absolutely.
country representative, country
Absolutely.
manager, as opposed to using an interpreter to help
Exactly.
facilitate
Yeah.
the conversation because you're also getting the cultural
Yeah.
benefit and the knowledge
Yeah.
from it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's that cross-cultural experience, I think, that can make you much more successful, or it
Yeah.
actually can lead to failure.
Yes. Yes. A professional interpreter is also trained to be that cultural conduit, but you're pulling
Right.
them into more
What I
details.
want to make sure is that that person
Yeah.
also, well, doesn't have to be a subject matter expert in what we are doing, but at least should come from the medical, you know, industry somehow.
Yeah.
Because all of these interpreters, I mean, you find also specialists, but in general, they're generalists. They can work for a politician, they can work for the medtech industry, they can work for, I don't know what. But again, in medicine and medical devices and healthcare, I think it's not just the language, but it's also, again, the cultural aspect of the language that plays a
Yeah.
major role.
Yes.
And translating an instruction for use, for example, that is
Yeah.
legal necessity. Yes, it can be translated correctly, but it's still not reflecting the culture of the language. So the translation offices that we are working with, they do the grammatically correct translation. And then we run it by a local native speaking subject matter expert who then
Mhm.
changes individual words to make sure that the
Yes.
culture is also reflected.
Yes. Okay. That's what we certainly see, at Rapport International when
Yeah.
people are having us do a translation. Yeah, get your local people to review it, but bring the
Yeah.
changes back to
Yeah.
develop the lexicon with the person who
Yeah.
is doing it. That's the best way to do it.
Absolutely. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, it's always fun, and I love to travel. I love to work in foreign countries or new countries where I haven't been to, but doing business is another story in such a country. And
Yes.
yes, it takes time, and then time is money, of course, but
Very American saying. Yes.
I would rather limit the exposure in the beginning and make sure that you understand this culture. And so for us, it was, for me, especially natural to come here to the United States because
Yeah.
yes, I have a very strong European background, but I think I have a understanding of American culture.
Yeah.
So it
So
was for
how
me a
did
natural fit.
you develop, because I can see somebody listening to this that says, okay, I'm coming out of one of these academic
Yeah.
institutions here in the United States. This is what I know. I'm in this field. How would you recommend they go about developing the partnerships in their field globally rather than just in the US?
Well, attend such conferences in Europe, for example. That's one
Oh,
way.
like go to Resi in
Yeah,
Barcelona,
go
Resi in
exactly.
London. Yeah.
And as well as you find here, when you come to the United States, there's, at least I know, a few cultural coaches, trainers that give you a first introduction into American business culture. It's not necessarily about the language. Pretty much everybody coming from Europe speaks English, but American business culture is a different thing. And
Yes.
there's trainers here in the United
Yes.
States, coaches that help you to understand how to maneuver that
Yes.
business culture. The same thing is available in pretty much every country. Now it's a different story when I'm from the United States. If I want to go to Europe, Europe is not one country. It's
No.
not as it's not as harmonized as one might think or
Yeah.
as I would wish. There is
Yeah.
no United States of Europe. So we have so many countries, even more languages, because some countries have more than one language, and you need to pick a country. I suggest to pick a country where to start. Doesn't
Ah,
have to be Germany. It's the largest population. It's the biggest economy. Yeah.
yeah.
But it doesn't have to be Germany. Pick a country where you want to get your foot in, where you have your, anchor point, and go from there and learn in that country, learn about the European culture, and then pick the next country. But don't go into Europe. That doesn't mean anything.
Right.
Go
Right.
into one country in Europe.
Yes. Yes. So maybe you're doing all the regulatory for Europe at once. Maybe you're doing the translation on your packaging and your instructions for work for use.
Yeah,
but focus on launching in one
exactly.
so you can grow from
Yeah,
there.
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I do have to say it was interesting that you are in the neonatal and the guest right before you was John
Yeah.
Conson, who is also in the baby industry. And the two of you greeted each other with a great big hug. And you're from completely different parts of the world. So I was like, well, that right there is playing out before my face about how to build partnerships and relationships in the field.
Absolutely. And the neonatal industry, the neonatal community, also from a healthcare perspective, is a very, not closed, but close. It's family. I think we know each other, whether we are competitors or friendly competitors or just in that business. And neonatology, taking care of babies, is just something very special.
Yeah.
And I, more than 20 years ago, dedicated my professional life to making sure that babies have the best possible start into life. And anybody working in that part of the industry is not signing up to my vision, but can share that.
Can share
Absolutely
that.
share that.
Yeah.
And so it was wonderful to see John here. I didn't expect that.
Yeah. Well, I was chuckling because I didn't realize that you two were placed next to each other and we're going to know each other, but it's wonderful. So, this question is coming.
Yes.
What is your favorite foreign word?
There's many. One is I lived and worked in Denmark, learned the language. I'm not fluent anymore. It's many years ago. But there's a word called hygge.
Okay.
You heard about it?
I have, but go ahead.
You have heard about it. So hygge means there's not one translation. It's to be comfortable. It's feeling pleasant. It's a nice environment. It's a safe environment. It's a relaxing environment.
Yeah.
That means hygge, and it can be used in various forms as a description of a place, of a house, of a spot. It can be a verb. It can be it's a whole environment.
Yeah.
And the Danish culture is very good at creating this hygge culture, which just makes you comfortable and relaxed and makes you feel safe and welcome. And I think it's a wonderful world and it's a wonderful concept.
Yes, I love it. And I like the way that you explained it too. That was very good and clear, and it captures it. And there is no direct translation.
No, there's no direct translation.
Yeah.
So I like words that don't have a direct translation.
Oh,
So-
I do too. Those are the fun ones.
Yeah.
You're working for a translation agency specifically. Where can people reach you if they'd like to know more or get in touch with you?
Well, so there's the neopredics.com website. There's my contact details. We are
And can you spell that?
neopredix.com.
Okay.
You find me on LinkedIn. My name is very unusual. Thorsten Waloschek on LinkedIn. There's only one. You find me there. So there's various ways of contacting me.
Oh, good. Well, thank you so much. It's
Thank
been
you.
such an interesting conversation. I particularly liked the partnerships forming that
Yep.
and how you do that around the globe. And I have a feeling that you're very good at keeping up those relationships.
I try my best.
Yeah, good. Well, certainly keep a relationship with me and let me know if
I
there's
will.
anything I could do. And
Of
as
course.
a thank you, I'd like to give you a copy of the book that I wrote
Great.
on global marketing,
Thank
the
you. Thank
language
you
of
so much.
global marketing.
Awesome.
And please let me know if I can do
Yeah.
anything for you.
Okay. You're going to send out information when the podcast goes out? Or how you do that?
Yes, we will send out the information. Listeners, we'll let you know on social media where you can find him. We'll give you more information about his company. And we really appreciate you tuning in for this episode that we're recording live at the Resi conference. If you liked it, send it on, rank it a 5, and certainly come back. And if you've got a good guest, send them over to the Global Marketing Show where you can apply to be a guest. Thanks so much, and we'll see you the next time.
That's a wrap for this session. A big thanks to you for listening to the Global Marketing Show. Hope you had just as much fun as I did. New sessions launch weekly on all places you find podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google Play, and of course on our website. If you know someone interested in this topic, please tell them about us. Au revoir for now.